My name is John Dawson, and I'm going to demonstrate how to build a light box. I'm building this light box primarily for use in printmaking to transfer drawings to various kinds of plates, in this case primarily pronto plates. To start with, you need a sheet of plexiglass. We'll talk a little bit more about the plexiglass later. This particular sheet is 20 by 26. All the pieces that go into making the light box have already been pre-cut, and of course they're cut to the size of the plexiglass. So the size of the pieces that you're going to be using will be determined by whatever size plexiglass you use. These are fluorescent lights. They're the kind of lights that you would normally use for under a workbench or under a cabinet. They can be obtained at Home Depot or possibly Lowe's. These are connectable lights. That means that they're connected together and they have one cord and they will turn on both at the same time. The connectable lights are a little more expensive than the ones that are not connectable. You really need two if you're going to build a light box that's very large. If you have the lights that aren't connectable, they're a lot less expensive, but then you need to have provision for two openings for the cords to go out in order to plug in both lights separately. The other thing you'll need is square molding. This is, as I mentioned, these are all pre-cut. This is a 2 by 2. Once they're milled, they're really less than 2 by 2. There's about 1.5 by 1.5, but they work just fine. This is a 1 by 4. You need 4 pieces. This is Gorilla Glue. We'll need some wood glue, an electric drill, about 8 wood screws, and a handful of small brad nails. So those are the materials you're going to need to build the light box, and let's get started. This is a diagram I've made of the light box. Two sides will be the same as the plexiglass, in this case 26 inches, and two sides will be larger. One way to figure out the addition is to put two pieces of the 1 by 4 together and measure the thickness. In this case, it's 1.5 inches. So the other two pieces will be 21.5 inches. On the length of 1 by 4 that's 26 inches, I'm using a piece of the 2 by 2 to mark where it goes and marking where I want to drill some guide holes for the wood screws. Then in the places where I've marked it, I'm drilling some guide holes for the wood screws. On the pieces of 1 by 4 that are 21.5 inches, I'm using a piece of 1 by 4 scrap to first mark that thickness, then using the piece of 2 by 2 to mark where it goes, and then marking where I'll be drilling the guide holes for those wood screws. On one of the end pieces, you'll need to drill a hole for the cord for the electrical fixture. The size of the hole and the position of the hole largely depends on the electrical fixture that you buy. I'm making the light box so that the plexiglass will sit down inside the light box about 1/8 of an inch. So I'm measuring 1/8 of an inch, and I'll be drawing a line across here in order to set the square molding on it later. I want the square molding to line up with each portion of the box as closely as possible. So I'm measuring down 1/8 of an inch on this section of the light box, and then I'm going to put the two pieces together and take a straight edge and draw all the way across to try to keep the line for the square molding as consistent as possible. I've cut these pieces of 2 by 2 1/8 of an inch short to match up with the line that I've drawn for the square molding, and will also be where the plexiglass will be resting on. Then I'm gluing them down to the piece of 1 by 4 that's 26 inches long. Once the glue is dried, then I'm going to add wood screws using those guide holes that I drilled earlier, and we're going to do that on all 4 sides of the pieces that are 26 inches long. Next, I'm going to add the square molding onto the 2 longer pieces. First, I'm going to put a little wood glue on it, and then I'm going to place it down on the line that I had previously drawn. I'm going to use some brads to tack it down with, mainly because very often a molding is slightly warped, and this way I can keep it straight. I use only 3 nails, 1 on each end and 1 in the center. You could use more if it was absolutely necessary, of course. Then I'm going to take a rag and wipe off all the excess glue. The next thing I'm going to do is add 2 brackets for the light fixture. These also go on the 2 longer pieces. I'm now adding the square molding to the 2 end pieces, and once again I'm going to use wood glue and some brads to attach it, and using the line that I had previously drawn as a guide. I'm going to put the end pieces on. I'm going to start by putting wood screws into the guide holes that I had drilled earlier. And then when I put this on the end, I'm going to use a carpenter square to make sure it's square before I drill in the screws. And then I'll drill the screws in. Now about the plexiglass. I have a sheet of plexiglass on hand that I wanted to use, and it's clear plexiglass, which means that it really needs to be coated with something so that it kind of diffuses the light. I made a test plate with 3 different variations. The 3 different variations that I did on the test plate were spray paint, white spray paint, 1 very light, 1 heavy, and then I coated 1 part with a sheet of mylar. This is the test plate that I made. The part that I did with the spray paint I think is pretty much self-explanatory. This is how I did the mylar. First I sprayed it with a spray adhesive. In this case I used 3M Super 77. Then I rolled it out flat, getting out all the bubbles, and then turned it over and cut off all the excess from behind. This is the finished test plate. The square on the left is the heavily sprayed white paint. The one in the center is the lightly sprayed white paint, and the one on the right is the mylar. I put a drawing over the test plate and then a sheet of Pronto plate to see which one gave the best visibility. The heavy white paint was not very good. The lightly sprayed white paint was okay, but the best one really turned out to be the Mylar. However, if you don't want to go to all that trouble to do the Mylar, the lightly sprayed white paint worked pretty well. Next, I'm going to attach the lights to each side. I'm going to attach the Mylar to the Plexiglas because I think that's the one that worked the best. First, you should put down some newspaper or newsprint underneath the Plexiglas, and then I'm spraying it with the spray adhesive all the way around. As soon as it's done spraying, be sure to remove the newspaper or the newsprint. Otherwise, the Mylar will also stick to the newspaper as well as the Plexiglas. If you roll up the Mylar before you put it down and just hold it, it'll just roll right out onto the Plexiglas, and then just roll it flat to make sure there's no bubbles in it. As I showed previously, you turn the Plexiglas over and then take a mat knife and trim off all the excess Mylar. I'm going to use Gorilla Glue to glue down the Plexiglas, and it seems to work best if you spritz some water on it first. You could probably do the same thing with a damp sponge. Then I'm going to apply the Gorilla Glue on top of the square molding all the way around on all four sides. Next, I'll be putting on the Plexiglas. One thing you should do is turn the Plexiglas over so the coated side is facing down. It really works much better if you have the coated side underneath. Now, normally I would put some weights on this to weight it down a little bit, but I wanted to see how it looks, and looks pretty good. Okay, this is the finished light box, and it works pretty well with two lights. But if you want to put in a third light to make it even brighter, it's easy to do. First, you have to measure and cut another piece of 1x4. Next, you're going to take a couple of 2x2s and cut them to the right size, put some glue on them, and secure them down to 1x4. Then you put in the brackets to hold the light fixture. Add the light fixture to the 1x4. Next, drill some guide holes to put in the 1x4 and light fixture. Here we're attaching the electrical light and putting in the 1x4, screwing it down in place, and you're finished. And now we have a light box with a third light. Well, that about does it for this one. We'll follow this up with some examples of my prints, some etchings and monoprints, and also the address for my website and Facebook page. You can also subscribe to other instructional videos of mine on YouTube.